Thank you. Where do you source your timber for various mass timber projects? What is the timber selection process? And can you describe some coordination and sourcing questions that have risen in the mass timber projects for you? And are there certain types of wood that work best in mass timber projects?
When it comes to sourcing, ZGF will, we've done some innovative things that is not business as usual. Most of the time, projects will go out and they'll specify glulam, CLT, things like that. And then the contractor will go out and on the market and just find whatever the best, usually most affordable product is. We've gone a little bit deeper because we care about kind of where material is extracted from and wanted to lean into kind of the equity around that and try and find ways not only to have to know where wood comes from, meaning increased transparency, but also try and find ways so that where resources are extracted from, that money can go back to those communities. Big picture, there are many different wood baskets across North America. In the Northwest, we have a lot of Doug fir and spruce pine fir that can go into different wood products. We've come up with different sourcing methods that use industry standards like FSC for more sustainable wood, but we also have come up with a handful of custom criteria. And specifically, we use those at PDX as a way of trying to get different landowners into the mix. So at PDX, we sourced wood from small families and tribal nations. So for example, at the airport, we had Yakima Nation provide over 600,000 board feet that went into arch glue lamps or glue lamps in our skylights. We also worked closely with the Coquel tribe to be able to source wood from then in what became a first sovereign sale from a First Nations tribe to a project not under or not brokered by the U.S. Forestry, which had never happened before. And so establishing these connections and working with our vendors and manufacturers, it allows us to know where everything comes from. At PDX, all 3.5 million board feet we know came from within 300 miles of the airport. 73% of that wood was sustainably sourced. So that meant either FSC certified or some of the other custom criteria that we established. And then 30% of it, I think it's 30% of it, we know specifically what the forest of origin was. So today, when you go to PDX, they have where does the wood come from stories kind of on plaques around the airport. So you can see all the different landowners that contributed. But we've tried to go beyond just the Pacific Northwest and work with manufacturers in the East, mountain states, things like that, to also go further and expand those transparent sourcing. In some of our Colorado projects, we've actually been working with manufacturers to and sawmills there for the first time to be able to take Colorado fiber and put it into press panels like CLT for Colorado projects too. So our goal is kind of to not export product from the Northwest to other parts of the country, but to make things as local as possible and find solutions that work for projects and are suitable to their market and to their region.
What were the design decisions when designing the airport to reduce congestion due to its increase in people? So like circulation and how people would circulate space. How do you plan on construction while keeping the airport in operation?
That's a good question. Yeah, so PDX, in going from its previous version to the expanded with this project, we double the footprint of it. at the time we were in pre-construction, we had about 19 million passengers a year. And the sizing of baggage system, the sizing of security were kind of all key considerations. And so we sized everything for that future growth for the 35 million passengers by 2045. But one of the, I guess the key decision was how do you organize that? And the way PDX works is when people come in from the east, they progressively move west and then turn north or south, depending on where their gate is. And we used that same strategy that pre-existed this project, but just moved it west and expanded. So today, I think at the north and south, there are a total of 20 lanes altogether. And the equipment and the quantity of lanes is really sized for that future growth. So we've got some time before we run into any kind of key bottlenecks. But the key thing throughout construction is really choreographing that ballet. And back in July or August, I should say, of 2024, we had this really unique handoff where we had existing security open and functioning one day, and then we closed it and opened the new one the next. And it really just became an exercise in, kind of, just directing traffic. Instead of going to the old, people were directed to the new, and it was this really seamless handoff. Today, we're still about a year away from opening, so we're dealing with a kind of temporary condition where people exit when they return to Portland. There's kind of a cross flow, but the volume of passengers is such today that it's easily, the spaces can easily accommodate that cross flow of traffic. But in the future, when phase 2 opens in about a year, we will have this kind of circular motion of people leaving and returning, where there really isn't any crossover. It's kind of this clean flow of passengers.
Thank you. For the PDX project, you kind of touched on this. By remotely prefabricating the roof modules into 3 sections, were you concerned about disruption of the structure or losing any integrity of the roof during its transport?
Sorry, it's reminding me of a funny conversation we had early in pre-construction. We worked with Mammoet, who was our heavy lift transporter, and the question came up about whether or not we needed to monitor strain in the structure when we moved it. And we said, is this something that you recommend? If so, how do we do it? And they said, well, when we moved this structure at Chernobyl, which was the largest heavy structure they had ever moved, they used strain monitors. And that kind of made the room kind of a little uncomfortable, because it's like, are these things that you're talking about radioactive? Would we have to deal with that on site? And it turned out we didn't need to monitor it, and we didn't need those materials from Chernobyl. But it was interesting because it was highlighting this fact that we were doing something that is not commonly done, and you're needing people with a skill set and tools that is uncommon. So we did kind of turn over every stone to determine what lengths do you take to preserve the structure. But what we actually found was the actual lift and transport of it was ultimately very simple and straightforward. There was a very rigid structure that would lift and transport the modules over. And when we would inspect the skylights that were prefabricated, installed at the prefab yard, or other elements of the roof, we found that there was ostensibly very, very little movement that did not compromise any of the connections. which was great because actually tomorrow night we're moving the penultimate module over to the terminal. And as of to date, we've had no impacts on air operations, which was a huge goal for the port. Today they have, I think, north of 20 million people that travel through there every year. And the idea of having to impact flight operations was just a deal breaker. I mean, that was the whole reason for doing the prefab yard in the first place. And it's exciting that today we've been able to do that without any impacts.
So what are the type of finishes you use in your projects that are sustainable? Are there some that you specifically use in the PDX project? And if so, are there any finishes that you recommend in particular and why?
Finishes, the selection of finishes are important because we care not just about the sustainability and the kind of low carbon quality of it, but also healthy materials. At PDX, we developed some custom criteria for selecting materials that have, low off-gassing, for instance. But we have some wonderful experts at ZGF that have developed red list free resources for selecting materials. But when we can, using natural materials is kind of always a preference for us and a go-to. One of the great stories of PDX is a product called Edge Grain that is a product that ZGF Forest produces. There's a long history of white oak being used in Oregon, but it was primarily like a kind of seen as a junk or firewood material, not something used for finished products because it's kind of a gnarly, irregular shaped wood. But ZGF found a way to use this material and create small sticks out of it to aggregate that kind of looks like a parquet, and develop it into pre-assembled tiles that install really easily. So it has a great sourcing story. It's carbon friendly, and it looks beautiful, and it really holds up well. We've installed it at a lot of the places in PDX where we have trees and other moments of respite or de-stressing that we're trying to create to improve that passenger experience. It's seen a lot of foot traffic and things in airports. Airports are high traffic areas with bags. Things are getting beat up a lot, and this floor has performed really amazingly, and stood up well. So while it's a premium product, when we try and select materials, oftentimes that first cost, if we can select a material that is healthy, it's not going to harm people. We don't want, we try and keep vinyls and other things like that out of product, not only because it impacts the people that live near the source of manufacturing, but also you don't want to negatively impact the building inhabitants either. So yeah, natural finishes are something we lean into. Durable materials. At PDX, we also use terrazzo, things that will hold up, be relatively low maintenance, but then also just last for a long time and be beautiful.